When I first saw the trailer for Shaft 2019, the fifth film in the Shaft franchise, I was honestly pretty scared. I thought, oh god, they're about to castrate Shaft. It's like growing up in the 90s and you see Ice Cube as the angriest black man in America, and one day you wake up and he's in Are We There Yet? Samuel L. Jackson is a guy who's been conducting a 24/7, 365 fire sale on his artistic integrity for the past 10 years. And I thought that after Django Unchained and Captain Marvel that he couldn't be emasculated any further. But this really looked like the nail in the coffin. Shaft is supposed to be a hard-edged guy. He lives on the streets. He's trying to get justice in the hood and not stoop to the level of the man. And then here he's going around with some kind of embarrassing megasoy stapled to his hip. This isn't Shaft. This is getting shafted. And it looked like this was going to be a real painful experience. But it turns out that the movie's actually pretty good. The movie opens with Shaft sitting in a car, getting his ass chewed off by his wife Maya, played by Regina Hall. Before Shaft can respond to her complaints, bullets start flying. There's a hit out on Shaft, and they've decided to go through with it now. Shaft takes care of the problem in typical action movie hero fashion. He puts the gun down, gets back in the car, and picks back up right where they left off. But his wife is a normal woman. This is not the kind of life that she wanted. Not for herself, and not for their baby, who's been in the back seat the whole time. She leaves him and takes Shaft's son JJ with her. We see time pass via montage. JJ grows up to be a tech guy working for the FBI. When JJ's friend Kareem ends up dead, he makes up his mind to try and find out who killed him, and he ends up in way over his head, really fast. He realizes he's gonna need Daddy's help for this one. Shaft is a character-driven movie. It always was. All we really need is a decent premise for the characters to work from, and the movie provides it. What's there is enough to establish in a believable way what brings these characters together and sets them on their way. By keeping the story simple, it avoids unnecessary padding, and the movie feels solid at an hour and a half, not overstaying its welcome. There's a couple twists, but they make sense, and the movie doesn't try to make them seem like a bigger deal than they are. Instead of trying to be too clever, more clever than it really is, the script smartly sticks to what it knows, and it sets up a framework where the characters can play off one another. The reason this movie is as enjoyable as it is due to the characters, who are great with a couple exceptions. Let's start with the ones that work. First, we've got Shaft, and this is a Shaft with balls. They let Samuel L. Jackson have his sack back. His decisive, no bullshit, guns blazing style is refreshing in an era when action movie heroes are so timid and non threatening. They seem to have wandered into their movies by accident. He's irreverent, he doesn't apologize, but a man can't be all things to all people, and it makes him pathetic to try. They call him a dinosaur, but the old ways don't just stop working, and being a badass never goes out of style. The movie compares Shaft to James Bond, and indeed the way they treat Shaft in the movie is like Pierce Brosnan's outing as 007 in Goldeneye. In that movie, Judi Dench's M savages Bond. Bond's a dinosaur, a relic of a different era. We're past that good guys, bad guys nonsense, she says. The new era doesn't need a super spy going around shooting villains and getting the girl. No, we need mature and realistic heroes for our enlightened times. That's why we have Daniel Craig's modern Bond, and he's a fucking loser, doing nothing but brooding and being all around ineffectual. But then we see that, in fact, the world does still need James Bond to shoot the bad guy and save the world. And when he does it, it's awesome. We want to see awesome people being awesome, especially in movies. And good on Shaft for realizing it. Shaft's ex-wife is also fantastic. On the surface, she seems like the typical sassy black woman. When the movie starts, she's roasting Shaft for his whole wardrobe being leather jackets and him keeping all his money in envelopes instead of opening a bank account. What makes this character work is that she's hilarious. These lines could have fallen flat, but they're great. When she snaps at Shaft, she does so with these observations that are funny, not degrading or malicious. Regina Hall's delivery makes Maya sound feisty and clever, instead of bitter, snide, or entitled. like she easily could have ended up being. Instead of portraying her as a superwoman, the film realizes the movie only needs one main man and allows her these moments of insecurity and vulnerability that let us see the caring woman underneath that Shaft felt so attracted to. She's got attitude, but she isn't all attitude. She's a fully realized character in her own right, something exceedingly rare in movies nowadays that flatten women by attempting to patronize them. As for Shaft's son, Urkel, this is the kind of character that's tough to pull off. You want him to be hapless, but you don't want him to be hopeless. In the beginning, we can't like him too much, because if we like him too much, we can't buy that this guy's a loser. But you make him too much of a loser, and we can't root for him. And when he eventually unfucks himself, it's too unbelievable, since the movie spent so much time undermining him. Jesse Usher's JJ starts off like a very believably typical millennial male. He's got a job that gives him stability, but he's got no respect. He's got a sense of entitlement that stems from insecurity. When he needs his father's help, he says, "You owe me," acting as though he overcame his fatherless childhood, even as he demands this compensation. He's got friends, but until the events of the movie kick off, he's the passive one of the bunch. While setting all this up, Usher and the screenwriters keep JJ likable. He's not whiny. He's not a quipping jackass who can't take anything seriously. He's a regular guy who fits, by every conventional metric, what was expected of a man of his generation. And then he steps out into the real world and finds himself woefully unprepared to deal with people who live outside of the safe spaces he grew up in. His situation is played for laughs at first, but he rolls with the punches and adapts. He grows into his father's son. I was pleasantly surprised, because he very easily could have been insufferable. And it helps that these three characters are the ones that the movie centers on. The characters that don't work don't have enough of a presence to lower the quality of the movie. I'll get to them later. But first, let's talk about what else makes Shaft worth watching. Now, mainstream critics, who are nothing more than professional shills, say that Shaft is a terrible movie because it's loaded with toxic masculinity. This reaction is amusing because it reveals that these critics are very much like Shaft's son JJ. They're educated, they have stable lives, and they believe the world would be a better place if we all talked things out and treated each other with respect. Yet these guys don't respect anything. They think that Shaft is behind the times and he has no place in the modern world. They wanted 2 hours of him being humiliated. They wanted it to be like the pathetic reboot of 21 Jump Street, where all the cool kids are shallow hipsters like them, and men of action are relegated to dark corners with nothing to do. When it turns out that Shaft is the one actually getting shit done, and he teaches his son rather than being emasculated by him, critics take this personally. When Shaft tells JJ the women want a man to act manly, the show media recoils. How can Shaft be so politically incorrect? Come on, Junior. Put that old man in his place. It's 2019. Their insistence that Shaft is an offensive and vulgar film because it disagrees with their values shows how worthless they are. Behind the crude language, this is actually a very wholesome movie. The jokes are genuinely funny without being mean spirited, and it greatly reaffirms the importance of fatherhood from both sides. Look at the movies now where there isn't even a father at all, or the father is a dumbass or an outright abuser. Likewise, the mother is often such a saint that they cease to feel like a character. Here we have a father who, though he fumbles, is there for his son, who's willing to put his life on the line for his son, and not having been there to raise him, is now there to show him how to be a man. We have a son who felt like he never needed his father, and resented him, realizing that in the end he looks up to him after all, and in the end, no matter how much he protests, he is his father's son. This is a movie that champions masculinity, particularly black masculinity. Not that fake rap money, money, money bitches masculinity, but a simple message of realizing the importance and specialness of the parents that you come from, and how the values that they can teach you will help you more than what's expected of you by society that won't do anything for you when you actually need it. That there are things that only your father can teach you and only a man can understand. It's an optimistic movie about treasuring the family and friends around you, the roots that actually matter and made you who you are, rather than simmering on and on about black grievance or social injustice that keeps you angry. And I guess they don't like that. I guess you can't have that nowadays. As for criticisms, this isn't a perfect movie. The action is unbalanced, which is common in movies these days. The movie opens with a shootout, and then everything else is loaded into the last half hour. The villain is effective, but we only have a very short time to get to know him. To be honest, he's not really the focus of the film, but personally, I would have been happy if there was at least like a minute or two more of screen time for him. The weakest point in the movie, in my eyes, were Junior's friends, Sasha and Kareem. Kareem is little more than a plot device. He makes almost no impression considering how important he is to Sasha and JJ. And as the movie goes on, he's almost completely forgotten. Even a few throwaway lines about him would have done a lot for this character. Sasha is JJ's love interest. Alexandra Shipp is charming in the role, with her bubbly voice and wonderfully expressive face, but the character, the way she's written, feels confused. Shaft's ex Maya balances strength and vulnerability well. Sasha does not. She doesn't seem like she has any sort of vulnerabilities not related to being in immediate danger, and throughout the movie, she fails to be anything other than a woman in proximity to JJ for no real reason. Why have they been friends for so long? Particularly when there's no indication that she's attracted to him. She comes across as bland, like she's just there. And it's especially noticeable when the characters around her are so well done and three-dimensional. What would have been nice would have been if they had simply made this character as gentle and unsure of herself as JJ, creating a parallel between them and the strong-willed, larger-than-life older generation represented by Shaft and Maya. The tiniest inkling of a pre-existing mutual romantic attraction would have opened the door for, I think, interesting, understated explorations of the awkwardness of millennial courtship. But here's my biggest problem with the movie. At one point, Richard Roundtree is back. He's in the movie for barely a minute, but I'd rather have too little than too much. It's a nice bit of fan service. Great to see him on screen again as the OG Shaft. But then there's this part where he's fist fighting a goon, and he takes a clean hit to the face, brushes it off, and says, "That all you got?" This annoyed me more than anything else because it's the most uninspired line when the scene is perfect to have him say, "Black don't crack." How could they have possibly missed that opportunity? Come on now. But to wrap it up, this is not a movie that puts you on trial. This is not a movie that tells you you're a bad person if you want to see a cool guy doing cool things. Doesn't spend 2 hours tearing down that cool guy to subvert your expectations because they hate you. This is not a shot for shot remake with useless garbage added in. This is not a reboot that changes everything you liked about the original. This is not a pseudo intellectual art movie that manipulates your emotions in lieu of having a substantive message. This is an unapologetic, true sequel with a wholesome theme, a smart script, and a likable cast. Brings together three generations of black culture, and it's just a good guilt free jam. So definitely see this movie if you're a fan of Shaft or you're sick of movie after movie with non-threatening pushover heroes like Han Solo in that god-awful Star Wars prequel. If you're a fan of Sam Jack and you've been wondering if he was ever going to have his balls back in a movie again. If any of these sound like you, this is your film. And I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And thanks for listening.